warm welcome to the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. We begin with the moment a captured Russian soldier appearing in a Kyiv court in Ukraine pleaded guilty to war crimes. It's the first war crimes trial since the invasion of Ukraine on February 24. 21-year-old Vadim Shishimarin was a Russian tank commander charged with murdering a 62-year-old civilian in the northeastern Ukrainian village of Chupakiva on February 28th. He could face a life sentence if found guilty. Kyiv has accused Russia of atrocities of brutality against civilians during the invasion and says it has identified more than 10,000 possible war crimes. Russia has denied targeting civilians or involvement in war crimes and accused Kyiv of staging them to smear its forces. Ukrainian state prosecutors have said the soldier and 4 other Russian servicemen fired at and stole a private car to escape after the column was targeted by Ukrainian forces. Well, over the last 48 hours, attention in Ukraine has been turned on the situation in Mariupol, where Ukrainian fighters have surrendered to Russian soldiers at the Azovstal steel plant. And much earlier today, Mariupol's mayor, Vadim Boychenko, said via video link that there still remains a humanitarian issue in the city, such as a lack of food, no potable water, and currently a power shortage. There's in fact no power in Mariupol as we speak. He says it's also not possible to provide any medical treatments in the city and there are no medications. He also says Russian forces had hastily buried the bodies of people killed in the assault on their towns, and those corpses are now in danger of polluting the water supply. Well, Russia says 959 Ukrainian fighters from the Mariupol steelworks have been taken to Russian-controlled territory in Ukraine since Monday. The country's defense ministry says 694 fighters from the Ukrainian military and the Azov battalion have surrendered over the past 24 hours. Much earlier today, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova accused the Ukrainian president of spreading lies and propaganda over a statement describing the handover of fighters defending Mariupol forces as a rescue initiated by the Ukrainian side.
These are some of the Ukrainian soldiers being led out of the Azovstal steel plant by Russian soldiers. Many of them wounded, but most weary from weeks of fighting, and now some respite as they're led out of Mariupol. The Russian soldiers search whatever belongings they have with them. Russia says the Ukrainian soldiers have been surrendering of their own free will. The Defense Ministry says 694 Ukrainian fighters, including members of the Azov regiment, had surrendered in the past 24 hours. Top-ranking Ukrainian commanders at the steelworks are still inside the plant, yet to surrender. Russia said on Tuesday that 265 of the Ukrainian soldiers blocked at the Azovstal plant surrendered. Among them, over 50 were seriously wounded, and all those in need of medical assistance were sent to hospital in Donetsk for treatment. The Ukrainian side confirmed that the seriously wounded soldiers have been sent to hospital. The Ukrainian fighters' surrender marked the end of weeks of siege on the last stronghold in Mariupol. The Ukrainian side says its fighters have fulfilled their combat mission, and the evacuation is only meant to save the troops in the embattled city, which is now deserted and calm, albeit destroyed. Mariupol, a key Azov seaport city in eastern Ukraine, saw one of the worst bouts of violence in Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Azovstal plant, which covers an area of about 11 square kilometers, is the holdout of the Ukrainian forces in Mariupol. The Ukrainian government has jailed the defenders as heroes who changed the course of the war with Russia by keeping Russian forces at bay for 82 days of siege and bombardment. Their fate, however, hangs in a balance, as separatists in Ukraine say a court will decide, and that any Ukrainians found to be neo-Nazi war criminals should face an international tribunal. Meanwhile, Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko today signed a bill broadening the scope of the death penalty to include attempted acts of terrorism. Belarus, a close ally of Russia, is the only country in Europe that continues to carry out executions despite calls for a moratorium. The law is expected to come into force 10 days after its publication.
Now, the European Commission has unveiled a plan for Europe to end its reliance on Russian fossil fuels by 2027 and the use to pivot away from Moscow to quicken its transition to green energy. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Europe's top gas supplier, has prompted the European Union to rethink its energy policies amid sharpened concerns of supply shocks. Russia supplies 40% of the bloc's gas and 27% of its imported oil, and EU countries are struggling to agree sanctions on the latter. To wean countries off those fuels, Brussels has proposed a three-pronged plan, a switch to promote more non-Russian gas, a faster rollout of renewable energy, and more efforts at saving energy.
So Repower EU will help us to save more energy, to accelerate the phasing out of fossil fuel, and most importantly, to kickstart investments on a new scale. So I would say this will be the speed charging of our European Green Deal. Energy savings are the quickest and the cheapest way to address the current energy crisis. We will therefore increase the EU energy efficiency target for 2030 from 9% to 13%. Then there is the massive investment in renewable energy, the biggest task. Here we are increasing our target for 2030 from 40% renewable energy to 45% renewable energy. We know that Ukraine is on the front line and defending our European values. We will continue to be by their side throughout this war and when they rebuild their country. And this is the third issue I wanted to inform you about today. We are proposing for Ukraine to top up the significant short-term relief provided until now with a new exceptional macrofinancial assistance to Ukraine of up to 9 billion euros in 2022.
Much earlier today, Finland and Sweden formally applied to join the NATO alliance at Allied headquarters, a decision spurred by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and setting in motion an accession process that is expected to take only a few weeks. Sweden and Finland were both neutral throughout the Cold War, and the decision to join NATO is one of the most significant changes in Europe's security architecture for decades, reflecting a sweeping shift in public opinion and the Nordic region since Russia's February 24 invasion. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who was on hand to receive the formal applications, described the move once again as historic.
And I warmly welcome the requests by Finland and Sweden to join NATO. You are our closest partners, and your membership in NATO would increase our shared security. The applications you have made today are an historic step. Allies will now consider the next steps on their path to NATO. The security interests of all allies have to be taken into account, and we are determined to work through all issues and reach rapid conclusions.
Well, nearly all NATO members are supporting the membership bid of Sweden and Finland, save for Turkey, which says both countries should not expect it to approve the NATO bid without returning terrorists. President Tayyip Erdogan, speaking to Parliament today, said delegates from both countries should not come to Turkey to convince it to back their membership in the alliance. Ankara says Sweden and Finland harbour people, it says, are linked to groups it deems terrorists, namely the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, militants group, and followers of Fethullah Gulen, whom Ankara accuses of orchestrating a 2016 coup attempt. President Erdogan said NATO allies had never supported Turkey in its fight against Kurdish militant groups, including the Syrian Kurdish YPG, which Ankara also views as a terrorist group closely tied to the PKK. Joining me now is Foreign Affairs commentator Colins. He joins me from Brussels. Colins, great to see you. And let's go over, why Sweden and Finland joining NATO is not much of a problem for Russia as Ukraine, because after all, Finland does share a border, a close one with Russia, even closer than Sweden.
Thank you, Marachi, for having me. Well, for a start, I'm not quite sure that Finland and Sweden joining NATO isn't much of a problem for Russia. Vladimir Putin may have said so, but of course, you also have to consider some of the actions that he's taking that actually makes you feel that he may be actually saying one thing. In actual fact, his intended action and his actual feeling is different. So yes, it bothers him. But there is a sharp contrast, of course, between Ukraine and the two other countries, Finland and Sweden. Ukraine can more or less be considered as a sibling of Russia. They have a lot in common. They share a common history. And, the geopolitics is completely different from, that of Finland and Sweden as a bloc, the Nordic countries. Now, there was a long-standing, I believe, a 70-year agreement between Finland and the former Soviet Union of non-alliance. Continuing to collaborate. And
Collins, we can't seem to hear you. I think you may have touched a button. To check your audio, I think you may have touched the button. We stopped hearing you for a few seconds. Are you there?
Really?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I think you can continue.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So in any case, the point I'm trying to make is that there is a sharp contrast between what Ukraine means to Russia and what the Nordic countries, in this specific case, Finland and Sweden, mean to them. Ukraine is more or less a sibling. They share a lot in common. They were part of the former Soviet Union and so on and so forth. So, it wouldn't surprise anybody that, Russia actually feels apprehensive and jittery over Ukraine having a closer collaboration with the EU and then NATO, the reason that they are fighting strongly. Of course, Crimea is an issue, which is, part of, the entire conflict, but now, extending. Now, coming to Finland and Sweden, yes, Putin is definitely not going without a fight. He may have said it's not much of a problem, but when he says so, I think it may be in comparison with Ukraine, but we can expect to see, quite some, resistance one way or the other, and also other forms of, diplomacy playing out to ensure that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it does seem like, Turkey is is actually doing Russia's bidding at this point, putting the stumbling block on that membership bid by Sweden and Finland. Turkey is focused on security and it's calling out Finland and Sweden especially because of the PKK and Fethullah Gulen, whom he accuses of masterminding that coup, which led to the killing and jailing of hundreds in Turkey in 2016. And then he says that there are other, militant groups as well that seem to be, that Sweden does seem to sympathize with. Do you think this is really a problem, for Turkey, or this is also Turkey playing to the gallery for Russia?
I think it's a combination of reasons, but I think overall, what is playing out here is transnationalism. Erdogan has proven himself to be a very, very astute politician, one that would seize on every opportunity to negotiate the best deal for Turkey. Now, let us recall that pretty recently, he actually held the European Union to ransom when he threatened to open the floodgates of refugees so that they will storm Europe, except they actually concede to some financial incentive for Turkey. He had his way. He was paid huge sums of money, and then he was able to keep the refugees from flooding Europe. So I believe that he is using this opportunity of Finland and Sweden ascension into NATO to actually get something that he hasn't quite, managed to make any headway in the past, which is supporting Turkey in their fight against PKK and other, Kurdish minority groups. That is his negotiating, tool. And it does look like the European Union, specifically Finland and Sweden, are positively disposed to actually listening to him because, they've taken it lightheartedly in terms of saying, well, it's not a problem. We are going to, negotiate with Turkey. And so they are very confident. And I believe that the source of that, their confidence, is that one way or the other, they are going to manage to accede to his request. Now, another angle to it, of course, is that in his address to Parliament today, Erdogan has said that they should not bother to come, but I believe that is talking tough. Ultimately, I'm sure they will be able to smoothen this out. As far as the link or the role that Putin is playing in all of this, behind the scene, working with Erdogan, well, it wouldn't surprise anyone that Vladimir Putin is doing that. However, if you assess the core of Erdogan's objection, it has absolutely nothing to do with any strategic reason other than the terrorist issue that he has brought up. So once that is sorted out to his satisfaction, I believe that the rest, will flow smoothly.
Colins, I just want to quickly get your thoughts on this. Mariupol, as it stands now, has fallen. The Ukrainian fighters have surrendered to the Russian forces. The city provides a link to Crimea. Has Ukraine now officially been divided by Russia?
Well, you can say so. It wouldn't be wrong to consider Ukraine, as things stand, being divided by Russia with the fall. We need to be a bit careful here because it does look like the last song hasn't been sung, but indeed it's looking like Mariupol has fallen. So yes, that effectively means a major victory for Russia in their bid to actually control Ukraine, but first chopping it up, in different bits and pieces, and then rearranging the card according to their own, interest. So yes, this is a major win for Russia in that regards.
Well, so much more to also talk about as the developments continue between Russia and Ukraine. Colins, thank you again for speaking with me.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Mariupol.